Eytzen to come up here. I know you're going to come down there and introduce your wife too, but Dale is one of our church missionaries. He's been on the mission field for, that's right, I'm not supposed to say that, how long, right? Because that tells how old we might be. Yeah. Dale's been on the mission field for more than 5 years. And he and his wife are currently at the Caribbean School of Theology. And I just want to introduce him. Would you give him a welcome this morning as they come?
Thank you so much. It's great to be back here. It's usually about 4 or 5 years between visits, but so glad that we can come back here and report as to what God has been doing and what opportunities you have helped us to provide for the development of, especially regarding the training of ministerial workers. And I have enjoyed the worship today. And well, first of all, I just love being in a place that's prayer conditioned. You know? Makes such a difference. And I love the connection between worship and missions. And I really appreciated the song choice here today because truly focused on the Lord. I love worship that's Jesus focused. Sometimes we're in places where the so-called worship music is more me focused. And it's good to thank the Lord for what he's done for us, but to really have the focus on the Lord. And John Piper put it this way. He said, missions is not the ultimate goal of the church. I was a little bit shocked when I heard that. But he goes on to say, worship is. Catch that. Missions is not the ultimate goal of the church. Worship is. Missions exists because worship doesn't. Missions exist because worship doesn't. Worship, therefore, is the fuel and goal of missions. Missions begins and ends in worship. So even when we're doing evangelism, what are we doing? We're seeking the missing worshipers. And that's what we all need to be involved in. Well, again, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to come here and especially to have my wife Delight with me, and part of the year she has been unable to travel with me. She had some serious issues with her knees, finally got surgery done, and then a month ago ended up back in the hospital, this time with blood clots to her lungs. So 1 month ago, over Christmas, she was in the hospital. But so thankful that she's with me here today and want her to introduce her to you.
Yay, it's really great to be here. And tell Pastor Mark and Jill we missed them. And we went to North Central with Pastor Mark. So, yeah, if you need to know anything about him then. No, just kidding. This morning I didn't mention, which I don't know why I didn't, but we have 3 kids. And Matthew and Darla and Micah. Micah was only he was only a year and a half. He turned 2 when we got to Jamaica, and turned 3, right? Wow. And anyway, and Matthew now, our oldest, he is married. He has two girls, and just had a boy. When I was in the hospital in Springfield, Missouri, she came to the hospital. I was on 4th floor, and she had our grandson down on the 2nd floor. So it was pretty interesting. And anyway, he's the first Eytzen in that bloodline of, there's not, if you look up Eytzens, there is not hardly any Eytzens in the world. And spelled like ours, Eytzen. And but his name is Adonai Zion Elohim Eytzen. Pretty cool. Yeah, our kids do have some really interesting, our grandkids have interesting names. Anyway, and then Darla, her and her husband, We have two granddaughters, three, and a grandson with them, and one in heaven, one that went to be with the Lord. He was 17 months old, and he got leukemia and was gone within a week, and which was really a tough thing for our family to go through, especially them. But the Lord is just blessed, and they're just a blessing to us, and have been used of the Lord, especially our daughter and son-in-law now, with able to help other people that have lost children and that are going through grief, and anyway, and we have a younger son, Micah, and he's not married. He's just he loves the Lord. They all love the Lord and are serving the Lord, and we're just so thankful for that, and and so thankful to be here. Oh, and thank you so much for your support, for your faithful support. God has blessed you, and used your support and your financial and your prayerful support. And so many times we have felt your prayers, and thank you so much for it. It was really great to spend time with Rich and Jean last night, seeing all their pictures of Japan. And I'm going all over the place, aren't I? But it's so wonderful to be here and to be with you all. And God bless you.
And we're thankful for God's faithfulness and your faithfulness through the generations. I believe your church had supported Delight's parents in their missions ministry to Guyana, Jamaica, and Belize. And Delight grew up mostly overseas from Wisconsin. Her dad was from the Wausau area. She was born in Berlin, but when her parents were pastoring at Watoma. But to see what God has done and established through their ministry, and now we've had the opportunity to pick up and to continue, and with the help of partners like your church, and we're so grateful for that. I wanted to give you a review of where we've been, what we've been doing, and we got our appointment to World Missions over 26 years ago now. So it's been I think it's been a quarter of a century that your church has been supporting us in the work of the ministry that we do. And it's taken various forms over the years, but we couldn't be doing what we're doing without you. So we want to show you some PowerPoint pictures and even let you hear from some of the students that we've been able to reach. And for us, it really is a daily delight to train ministry workers for current and future ministries. And I'm going to step down here because for a little bit of this, I'm going to have to read it. But we started itinerating to raise our first budget in 1994. And in 1995, we followed in Jamaica, where Delight's parents had retired. A couple months later, we got down there and picked up with much of the same work as directors, national directors of International Correspondence Institute, and then training through Extension Bible Schools and the Resident Bible School in Jamaica. Now, of course, we got teased all the time about going to a place like Jamaica. Must be nice doing beach ministry. We rarely saw the beaches, but we saw more of the mountains interior, like the Blue Mountains, and they have the awesome Blue Mountain coffee, which you usually can't afford. It's over $50 or $60 a pound now in the States. But friends of ours, colleagues of ours, established a children's home up in the Blue Mountains, and they had some coffee up there at City of Refuge that they were able to sell with the Blue Mountain label as to sustain their ministry. And I got to taste those coffee berries. I didn't know they had a sweet berry that you could eat that is around the coffee bean before they roast it. But anyway, we served our first term in Kingston and then in the southeast, and then moved up to Montego Bay and reestablished an extension school there. And then our second 4-year term, we served the resident school in Christiana, right in the middle of the country. But then we responded to an urgent need for the country of Palau, which most people have never heard of. It's about 7,000 miles west of here in 15 time zones at the western end of the region known as Micronesia. And you see why they call it micro, with the size of the tiny islands there. And in Palau, although they have 200 or 300 little islands, people live on 6 of them primarily. And we lived on the largest island, which you see on the north part there. That's roughly the size of Lake Winnebago, about 30 miles north to south and about 10 to 12 miles east to west, and a population of 20,000 people. But you know, there's no place too small or too remote for the gospel of Jesus Christ. And we did primarily pastoral work there. I continued to teach, especially on Wednesday nights, and give some of the same information that I taught on a more formal basis in Bible school that I taught to help train leaders there. But it was especially impressed upon our hearts by the close of that term that no matter where you go, no matter how small, you could never disciple and evangelize enough. But if you can invest yourself in training others to do the work, that's where it begins to multiply in its effectiveness. And so then we responded to another request for help. But before we did, we said, we've got to try this national favorite that you see in the upper right corner there. A little bit hard to see it all, but you see a little head poking up there. That's a national favorite in Palau. That's bat soup. Yeah, they drop the whole bat in and cook it a long time so everything gets soft. They eat the head, the wings, everything. And we were happy, though, to share it with our youth pastor. And we said, Milton, we know you want the head. Help yourself. So so you get to taste some unusual things. Afterwards, if you want to see more pictures, we do have some food items that were a little bit different in Guyana, where we served after this. But I'll have more pictures back at the table. But we responded to the request for help with the Bible colleges in Guyana. And we were excited about that because of Delight spending most of her childhood there. And her parents, David and Gladys Gunther, they were the very first Assembly of God missionaries and helped to establish that work. So we worked in a different area, mostly on the Essequibo coast at the Extension Bible School there. We did get to visit for a special anniversary trip beautiful Kaieteur Falls, which you had to fly to further inland, single drop waterfall of 741 feet, so quite dramatic. But Guyana, we say Guyana, and a lot of people think Ghana because they've heard of more missions work in Africa. But this is in South America, above Brazil, and between Venezuela to the west and Suriname to the east. And we lived, overall population's about 750,000, about 500,000 in the Georgetown metro area. And we lived about where the capital G is for Guyana, in that little box there on the Essequibo coast, about 100 miles from Georgetown. But we had to plan about 7 or 8 hours to travel between those 2 points, especially if we were taking our car, mostly because of the river crossings. Now, Georgetown itself is, if you look at the bottom right corner of that inset map, you can barely see the Demerara River. That's a mile-wide crossing, but they have a bridge across there now. Actually, back in the 1960s, when the Gunthers were there, Delight's father was in a terrible boat accident, and several people died. He found himself underneath the little boat with 7 people that they were in, crashed into an incoming boat from the ocean, big bauxite boat, and the guy piloting the little boat was drunk and thought he could beat the boat coming in and crashed into this big boat that didn't see them, and he found himself under the water, coming up under the big boat 3 times with no chance for a breath before he got in the water. Thought he was going to die. His arm was tangled around a rope attached to an empty spare gas can being drawn to the propeller. Just as he reached the propeller, it stopped. And 2 were able to jump off the little boat and swim to the shore, but he was the only one rescued out of the water, and the others died. But found out later there was a lady, I believe in Connecticut, God woke her up to pray. And she contacted our missions department and said, do we have a missionary by the name of Gunther? God woke me up to pray. She'd never heard of them before, but God gave the name, and she prayed until there was a release. And so it's so important that you respond in prayer when God urges you. Whether you know or remember our name or not, we hope you'll pick up a prayer card in the back to be a reminder to pray for us. But also in the inset map there, coming from the Demerara, there's about a 45-mile trip, a 45-minute trip over to the shores of the bank of the Essequibo River, which has a 7-mile crossing. And so there's no bridge across there. 365 islands in the Essequibo River. And so you have to wind your way around those muddy waters. It isn't like other parts of the Caribbean where it's real scenic and all of that. But one of the ways to get across is by boat taxi. And you could do that for only $1,200. But you get a little bit of sticker shock there, not like Japan, but 200-to-1 ratio. And so $6 or $7 wasn't too bad. And but it could be a very wet, back-jarring ride. And everybody just hold up the tarp when it get the torrential rains and or the bumpy ride over the waves. You get a lot of splashing, and they have more of the boats are covered now. But the other way, if we had our car, was to take the ferry. The old ferry on the left, they would cross at 12-hour intervals. But the old ferry only held 25 vehicles, and they would have trucks bringing supplies to and from the Essequibo coast. Be very crowded. We had to line up at least 3 hours in advance, and the time changed by at least an hour every day due to changing tides. So we had to be there sometimes 3 or 4 in the morning to get a ride across, and it would take about 4 hours to cross. And Delight liked the challenge of, I think she enjoyed the driving in like Jamaica and Guyana more than I did. That aggressive edge for driving. But if I was taking the kids to school, they'd say, come on, Dad, Mom would have been around that car. But anyway, getting on those boats, especially the old one, they had these narrow planks, and then they would park you so close. And you had to tuck in your side view mirror and decide real quick before they park the next car. Am I going to be outside my car the next 4 hours or inside my car for the next 4 hours? But that was part of the fun of the journey. Here's one of the classes at the Essequibo Coast Bible School. Most of the year we had night classes for 16-week semesters, but twice a year we had summer, we had some intensive day classes, and students that had work that prevented them from doing the night classes, or like Pastor Frankie in the middle there, came from a long distance away whenever he could from one of the Amerindian villages. We'll see him again later. But we were able to help them have their first graduation there. And then we had Sunday ministry as well. This is one of the smaller churches that we helped out at. Delight's going over a little walkway that was over the water canals that carried the sewage and all basically their water supply in and out. And sometimes people would be fishing for their suppers in those canals and some of the bigger ones. But anyway, she said she was always worried that that little church would rock off. People get excited in their worship, and she was worried that it would rock off of those few blocks in the corners holding it up. But they had no electricity there, so we brought our battery-operated keyboard and gave a little assistance with the music. And Delight did give some keyboard lessons. Sometimes while I was teaching, she was also teaching. But her favorite thing, though, was to do a weekly Bible club at the local elementary school, along with one of our lady pastors. And the Essequibo Coast, we were told, is over 80% Hindu. You don't often think of that factor when you think of the Caribbean, but some of these places like Trinidad and Guyana and Suriname have a high percentage of, Guyana is about 43% Indo-Guyanese, and so some of these communities and regions are a high percentage of Hindus. And also, 10% of the population in Guyana are Muslims. Right in the community where we lived at Anna Regina, they had a big Muslim school and bused kids there from all across that area. But Delight loved giving the hugs, and I should also mention that with the Muslims, when they found their kids were attending a Bible club, they didn't like that and said that their kids were forbidden to attend. But Delight says they would just crowd around the windows from the outside because they loved the stories and the songs, and many of them responded to the gospel. So we thank the Lord for every opportunity that we had. Now, if you are traveling from Supanam, which means name above, that's what we were called to proclaim. That's where we would arrive coming across the Essequibo River. Then you go north-northwest along the coast up toward Venezuela. The road would end at the Pomeroon River. If you wanted to get to Venezuela, it required another 7-hour boat ride to get there. But up and down the Pomeroon River, there were churches, and this is how they would get to church. Also took a trip with ministry leaders from the area to go and help develop more ministries among the Amerindian villages. And we split up in 4 different directions and did a 3-day weekend. The group I was with went to Asakata, which is where Pastor Frankie, that we saw in the classroom before, this is where he was from. In fact, this is his new, larger, improved house for his wife and 8 children. You can't see his old house behind there, and off to the right is their cooking shanty. But what really impressed me was before he finished his house, he finished God's house. And to see what they had done in such a remote location. Beautiful hardwoods there, green heart and purple heart and so on, but a lot of supplies they had to bring in down that smaller Maruca River, crossing part of the Atlantic Ocean and then the bigger rivers. But here's Pastor Frankie Blumhart, and now academically he struggled. He had difficulty passing the exams because English wasn't his first language, but he was there not for more of a paper certificate to hang on the wall, but to go to another level, to take his people to another level. And that's what we appreciate and what we love to do, is just to take our students from wherever they are and take them to the next level. And we were there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, did workshops and seminars and preaching. And then the whole church came down to see us off, and you see some of the transportation that some of the local people, that's how they arrived there. But such a warm group of people. But then at the end of that term of 4 years in Guyana, we were asked to join Caribbean School of Theology, which is in desperate need of more faculty, more teachers. And so we serve the greater Caribbean region. Now, if you look at strictly the Caribbean, that's kind of this pocket here. But we serve the area that goes up into the Atlantic and then down into South America, including Guyana and Suriname, the English-speaking countries. There, we have a Spanish-speaking counterpart organization that ministers in the Spanish-speaking countries. But of the countries that we are serving now, which are depicted on this map, what is most significant here is of all of these countries, only one of them has a resident Assemblies of God missionary at this point, and that is Belize, has a single missionary. And all of these, part of our work is to work our way out of a job. And there are new places on the horizon that it looks like we very soon will have another location to go to in further interior in Guyana, as well as possibly in the Virgin Islands, both British and American. But all of these countries, although they are able to they are able to pastor their own churches and have their own national leadership, they are still very eager for our help in training their ministers and taking them to another level. So what we do is we go in with 2 and 3 week seminars, and it looks a little bit different in the different nations we go to because they have different programs in their own country. Some of them, like in Turks and Caicos, have no ministerial training available for the Assemblies of God. And so then we go in from ground zero and work them up to an Associate of Arts degree. Other places, they may have up to a 3-year Bible school diploma program, which usually takes them longer than 3 years because only Jamaica has a full-time resident program. The others, it's on a part-time basis. But in any case, if they have a diploma program, then we come in with the 4th year level and help them reach their Bachelor of Arts in Bible and Theology and provide graduate study opportunities as well. And we do workshops and seminars and various things, but our main focus is Bible college level work. And so, again, to take them where they are up to the next level. The Great Commission, Jesus told us to go and make disciples. He didn't just say go and make converts. And thankfully, people can be saved in an instant. But discipleship requires more time and more investment. It begins with evangelism, but it doesn't end there. And these people don't live on you think of Caribbean, you think of beaches, because that's what we see advertised. But that's not where these people live. And the environments they live in can be very rough. And the crime and the immorality and the cults and the false religions. And we want to develop disciples who in turn will make other disciples. And they've never really experienced a region-wide revival. There's been little pockets, but we're praying that there will be a revival like they need and like has never been seen before. And I want to give you a glimpse of what, these are a couple of email responses from students after my class in Suriname. Sherry Ann Griffith wrote and quoted this Chinese proverb and said, if the vision's for a month, you plant wheat. If it's for a year, plant trees. But for a lifetime, plant people. Thank you for planting in our leaders. And then from Freeport, which now more recently has sustained such terrible hurricane damage, we're thankful for Convoy of Hope and recovery that is being made there. But after our class there, about a week and a half later, she said, I trust all is delightful on your end. The students at a couple locations picked up on my form of humor, but said, just wanted you to know we completed our missions outreach on the island of Eleuthera. There were 11 persons in the group. It was an extraordinary time ministering together, especially after completing the Great Commission Strategies course. They were overjoyed to be a part and did excellent work in reaching out to the communities. And then she went on to say how they were, in that short outreach, were able to lead 17 people to faith in Christ and lead 4 into the baptism of the Holy Spirit. Praise God. That's what really gets us excited. And to see that they really got the heart and message of that course, and including this portion where she said then they connected with the local pastor to be sure that there would be follow-up and discipleship. And they said, your work is not in vain. Keep up the contribution. And about 9 months ago, Turks and Caicos had their very first graduation with 6 students getting their Associate of Arts degree in Bible and Theology, including the pastor and presbyter, Bradley Hanfield. And 2 days later, they had a credentialing service. Leadership came up from the Bahamas, and 2 of these students received their ministerial license, and 1 was ordained. And that afternoon, they went and dedicated